Oh, hello. Happy Tuesday evening to you. Welcome to the Rich Live Show. I am Rich Live. I am in the ATL with my host, the one and only.
Lady L is here with you guys this evening. How y'all doing today?
Hey, 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 how are you, Lady L? How's everything in North Carolina?
It's going well. The weather is changing. It's getting a little bit cooler, so fall is definitely here. Are you ready for that weather change?
I am. I embrace it. I embrace it. Coming from Florida, being a Florida boy, now I'm in Atlanta, man. I love the changing of the season. Winter is too long. Winter is too long in Atlanta.
I hear
Just
you,
hopefully
definitely.
they heard that. So we got a great topic today. You had something you wanted to say?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, we are. We have a very great topic that we're going to talk about today. I don't know if you listeners remember, we talked about the four C's with the community, the core, the connection. But in order for you to have those four C's, it's all about communication. Communication is what we're going to be talking about today. And what is good communication? How to get good communication? We're going to dig into that. And Rich and I are going to make sure to give you some very good nuggets, some motivational moments to help you with your communication. So,
Exactly.
with that being said, I've got to ask you, Rich, what is your definition of communication? Good communication, that is.
Um, Basic is the ability to relay information in an efficient and effective way. It's just that simple. It's just relaying information.
Right. I agree. Because I believe that people remember how you make them feel more so than the words that you say.
Mm,
And so there is different types of communication. We're going to get into that. And I know that you have a lot to share as far as, what's spoken versus unspoken. Because, a lot of people, they're thinking about the words. And don't get me wrong, words are very powerful as far as communication is concerned, but there's things that you don't say, that people pick up the most. And I know, Rich, I'm looking at you because you always get on me about this, on what I don't say, but what I'm speaking. I have a friend that says to me all the time, she says, listen to what I'm not saying. And so that means a lot. That comes across a lot. So, what are your thoughts about that?
that's true. That's true. I think some of the most important things that we don't hear is where the actual messaging is in what's not being said. So some of us listen for what we hear. Some of us are listening to how it's being said, the tone. But how about paying attention to what's not being said? The verbiage in between, or the non-communication, because sometimes silence and non-communication is just as important as what we're hearing.
Yes, absolutely. So before we dig into that, I think we need to set the tone a little bit and let's define what is good communication. Would you define communication as, hey, just getting it out, just expressing what it is that you need to express? Is there any such thing as bad communication? I mean, what are your thoughts about that? Let's have
Oh
some
man,
real
that's
talk
a lot
for
to
sure.
that's a lot to unpack. Yeah, so yeah,
Yeah.
there is a such thing as good communication, right? There's a such thing as negative communication, and also non communication, like non verbal communication can be also effective as well. Knowing when not to speak. Some people uh, just have to get it out. They just have to speak. You have to respond or have a some type of clap back or response to what was said to you, especially if it's negative. We have to communicate. So hopefully by the end of the show, I'll give you some effective ways to communicate without communicating and
Mm,
without verbalizing and vocally saying things, but you can say things. Women are very good at
I knew
non-verbal.
it.
It's coming. Women, you
I knew
guys
it was
are
coming.
subject matter experts at non-verbal communications. You women will cut people like a razor blade without saying a word. And some of y'all are on this chat line.
Oh my goodness. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. All right. All
Yes.
right. the ladies who are listening, who are in the chat room. And by the way, for those who are not in chat, we welcome you to just come into the chat room. And we have our fabulous moderator, Ronnie, that will be able to welcome you and join the chat so we can get your feedback on what we're saying. Because, ladies, I think there was a challenge there as far as our communication and what we're not saying. So I'm going to try to represent. But please put your comments, your questions into the chat so we can make sure to recognize it. So go ahead, continue. I wanted you to
Okay.
finish that.
All right, so let me reset real quick. Say hello to everybody. Shout out to Ronnie, Veronica, Miss Freeman, music, of course, that cat Dave, and who else we have in here? Just want to say hello to everybody that's there. Hey, if you're not in the chat room, you're missing a great conversation. Hey, Bridget, how are you? So I'm gonna dive into it. Don't get mad at me. Listen, I've been known to tell the truth, and sometimes it is hard. Silver Fox. I may have to use you today, Silver Fox. Welcome, welcome to the chat. I always use my mom in examples because I tell real life stories. So let's get back to the unpacking of the word communication. We're talking about communication, unpacking the nonverbal. And I was speaking about women, how women are the best at nonverbal communication. Why? Because I think women are very animated in their expressions sometimes. And sometimes not expressing or showing any expression is just as lethal as saying something. So, effective communication is so broad. And I mean, we can really have a week-long show about the way we can proceed or be successful with effective communicating. And then I'm going to share some stories with you, and you can go ahead and tell me how you break down, how do you define communication?
Wow. Okay. Well, I agree with what you're saying. Communication is actually getting a message across. So just to add on to what you were saying, communicating, there's a people who, from the beginning of time, men have been trying to get a message out. And so we have different languages to get that message out. So I believe that good communication, well, communication is just getting the message out. Good communication is making sure that message is heard, understood, and it is a two-way conversation, two-way of communicating. A message sent, message received. Think of it as like an email. You send the email, it is received, and then you send a response. So that's my simplistic definition of communication and effective communication. So
Okay, all
yeah.
right. So I have to. How you doing, Raymond and Sheila G? Welcome. Let me give you my background, full disclosure on communication. I had to take some very intensive training. I've been trained by the Secret Service. I've been trained by the Ramsey Benet investigator, the one that did the interrogation. So I had some very extensive training on communicating because I was an interrogator, and I did some interrogations on some very high-profile cases. So I really see communications different. So I learned some things about communications and communicating non-verbally, verbally. We communicate with our hands, our body, our kinetics, right? So there's so many different ways to communicate or not communicate. So the thing that's most important is for those of us that may have faced some trauma in our childhood, trauma from relationships, trauma from loss. This is where it really gets a little hinky because the lack of communication, the lack of ability to express. Communication is like a form of expression, right? So sometimes when you're dealing with hardship, pain, loss, grief, things of that nature, your inability to express what you're feeling sometimes can be hindering, and it could also be painful. And this is the reason why we seek therapy, because they are good at going by the numbers to kind of chronologically get you to communicate in a certain fashion, to express. And it's not always a solution that's required for communication. Sometimes it's just the communication. And I'm gonna put a pin in it right there and get your thoughts on it.
Absolutely. Taking that, that was very well said. You're absolutely right because it is the trauma or the process of someone not being able to express themselves. It is a form of expression. And it goes back to my definition of it is actually a message that you want to relay or to get out to others. And have you ever heard a parent say to a child, use your words? And
Yes.
it's because they have a feeling on the inside or they're not quite sure they're in touch with their feelings and they have to put a word of expression to how they feel. It is very important for us to be able to communicate and get that message out because it's therapeutic in that process. Because when you don't have it and you're feeling like you're silenced, that's whenever you feel like you are not receiving the love or receiving the care that you need. So, yes, I agree with you totally with that.
Yeah. So, you know, there's so many different areas we can use this conversation. We can use it personally, intimately. We can use it in our relationships. We use it for employment, in our professional lives. We can use it in our religious life. Like, there's so many parts of our lives that this component is so important to understand, especially when it has to do with growth and development. And then as you evolve in life, you don't always communicate the same. So the older you get, the more effective your communicating skills are. This is for my mature audience because you have so much life experience and you've seen so much and you've experienced so much. So your communication becomes a little bit more effective because it's coming from a foundation of nomenclature as opposed of you comparing that to a child who don't really know what they're feeling or how to express what they're feeling, and someone that's seasoned in life, they can just pull data right away. And sometimes it can be painful because the older you get when it comes to communicating, the less filtering that is embedded into the ability to communicate. Kids typically don't curse, and younger folks, we're very diplomatic in the way that we're speaking to people at times, unless we're angry. Older folks don't necessarily have that filter anymore. So if it comes up, it comes out. And most often, that's why they tell you seek counsel from the wise, the elder, right? Because
Yeah.
their data is more than likely to be raw. Their communication is more likely to be unfiltered. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. I don't know if you heard this, but I used to hear this from my grandparents. It is like, because of my wisdom and knowledge and being older, I have earned the right to be unfiltered in my communication. And I think it just comes with the territory with them being older. You just kind of like brace yourself to say, like, hey, it's coming unfiltered. And so you just receive it and accept it and appreciate it. That's my thought on that. But there are some people who are just unfiltered in their communication style.
Yes.
And they feel like that's okay, because that's their way of expressing themselves.
Right.
So, but I know that before we move on to how to have a good, effective communication, I wanted you to give an opportunity. I said you said put a pin there, so I want to make sure you had an opportunity to talk about more about why it's so important for us to have good communication.
Because
I want to make sure I
yeah, thank you for going back to that. I think it's so important to understand effective communication because it is the dialogue that's required to turn an actual expression into a thought, to a complete thought. Something needs to be processed based on the way you articulate um, your expression, right? So it's kind of like being in pain or being hurt or wanting something to start or stop, right? So this is all going to be done in a form of communications. You have nonverbal, you know, the universal, right? You have verbal, and then you have implied, where you can use expressions, your facial expressions, your eyes, things of that nature. The body kinetics really respond to all communications. And sometimes we're responding to that stimuli and we don't understand why. And it could be simple.
Yeah.
Someone that you don't know, you may not even like the way they looked at you. That is a form of communication, right? So there's so many different, let me tell you, I can go on and on and on and on. And I'm going to share a story with you in a little bit, but I'm going to let you get back to the format of communication.
No, you're right on it. I'm laughing because you've said that to me before. I mean, the unspoken communication. I think you get on me a lot about my facial expressions and what is being displayed, and then the words that we actually say. And I haven't forgotten what you said about women, about how we naturally communicate
I got a
and how we
story.
do that. Ladies, please put something in the chat. Put some ones in the chat if you heard what Rich was saying about us and how we communicate and how expressive we are. So
So it is true.
if you feel
It is
me.
true. I remember me and my boys, we were at my mom's house, and my mom is probably a subject matter expert at communicating non-verbally, right? So I would have people say, "Man, your mom is so nice," and I'll be like, "She just cursed me out." But we didn't hear anything. I was like, but I heard it all. Like she has these looks about her, and I can literally translate what every word that is not coming out, and I'm feeling every bit of it. Her nonverbal communication is excellent. I'm saying that to say that women are the best nonverbal communicators. However, don't necessarily do so well in the expression part of communicating. I'm gonna give you, this is an actual true story. So full disclaimer, disclosure, I worked for so many different acronyms in our, the law enforcement community, all the acronyms I worked, and I had special duties to do. But one of the things that I did a lot of was interviews and interrogations. And I was often called because I'm what they call like disarming. Disarming meaning that the way that I communicate, it's non-threatening, it's non-violent, it's welcoming, it's warm, so people are more likely to open up. So they would use my character and my personality to be able to try to determine, who committed this murder, who's involved. Those are the things that I was doing, and I felt real good about it. There was this one particular person that I interviewed, and I knew she was involved in the murder. I knew it, and I was excited about being able to get her to confess to me. And women tend to be the toughest one to break, right? So I tried everything. You're never going to see your kids again. I went to the family, I went to the children, and I was like, this woman won't break, she won't break, she won't break. And I had enough evidence to make the arrest, but I wanted the confession, right? I wanted the confession. She was a lady that was in probably her early 50s. And I was just going in, and she just fainted. And I panicked because she just passed out. She passed out in the interview, just passed out. And I'd never experienced anything like that. So I went and got some help and got, called for some assistance. And one of the elderly, more senior investigators, he was a, what do you call those people? Polygrapher, where he would do polygraphs. And he would do lie detectors and things like that. And voice stress analyzers is when they connect the machine to your chest, and it measures how your body reacts when you're telling the truth. So I went in hard on this lady, and she passed out. And I thought I killed this lady. I was like, oh my God, is she breathing? She fainted. So what happened was, she was whatever relationship she was in, it wasn't her, it was the guy that she needed to give up. But whatever relationship she was in, they had some type of pact, and she was going to be a hold it down type of woman. She was going for the ride regardless. And she was a ride or die. But
Oh, wow.
the polygrapher came in and said, "Oh, I see this all the time." I was like, "What do you mean you see this all the time?" He said, "Yeah, yeah." He said, when you really pressure people, um, they're communicating. You're just not hearing it. You're just not seeing it.
Mhm.
But there's so much going on inside internally that it shuts her body down. But she's not. She refused to talk. So the point I'm trying to make is that using that same tactic on a guy, he starts to speak. Rather it's a lie, rather it's just being confrontational, but he will begin to speak. She, on the other hand, is completely optional because women have that nonverbal ability to communicate, and whatever she had going on internally, it just became
Mhm.
overwhelming, which shut her down. I'm using that as an example on how strong of a nonverbal communicator that a female could be.
So what you're saying is that we as women, our default setting is for us to go with the nonverbal cues. That's just our body language. So we're going to talk more with body language. That is our default the communication style. That's what you're saying, right? So that's
Yes.
what I'm hearing
Yes.
from women, right?
So, yeah, so here's the thing. All right, women, don't cancel me. But this is my thought, right? Full disclosure, disclaimer, I'm not certified in any type of profession about communication, right? I am certified well in interrogations and interviews, but as far as communications and mental health and all of that, no, no, I'm not capable to really give expert advice. But one thing I know about women as it relates to communication is that there's an acute communication. There's the norm, and then there's the nonverbal, and then there's an acute. The acute, it's when they just let you have it. That means that all ability to suppress the nonverbal, you have lost that ability to continue to suppress the nonverbal. Now you're going to get the business. There's no
Mm-hmm.
necessarily a medium. A lot of women will go from okay, okay, which you say a lot.
I knew you
you
was
you
gonna
say
say.
okay a lot. The okay, the okay, and then some of the non or the very minimum words, they're so packed. And I can have a course on this for gentlemen. When a woman says very little, there's an array. There's like a dictionary of words that were just thrown at you that you didn't catch. So sometimes when they say less, they're actually saying more. And men miss those cues a lot. And then by missing those cues for so long, then that's when they get the explosive because they've already
Mm,
imploded internally. So the explosive,
yeah.
you're going to start, you might be called a couple of adjectives. You're going to hear it, you're going to get the business. So this is just
Yeah.
I like to see in the chat. What do you guys think about that? Most women will probably not necessarily have too much of a medium, but they'll probably be laid back, nonverbal, probably expressive emotionally. Um, but then when all else fails, there's that acute explosiveness where you get way more communication than you ever thought that you would hear.
Yeah, let's look into the chat. I want to read some of these comments here. So we have Sheila G. She says those looks work when you're in public places. Your kids immediately know that unspoken language. I agree with you. Yes, that's helped with disciplining your children. And then Sheila G. was also saying I own a cute. And then I just want to go back and Ronnie was saying communication is not always spoken. That's a look. My children, my grandchildren know the look. They better not, or just my silence. So I think we're agreeing with you with the unspoken way that we talk and what's not said, listening to what's not said. But let's move into a little bit of how to have effective communication. I want to make sure that we get into that. So if you could answer what is how someone can improve their communication or have good communication? What would your
First,
answer would be to that?
first understand communication, right? We say that's the ability to
Yeah.
relay information effectively, right? Uh, the ability to have an effective dialogue and an exchange. One of the things that I was taught in my career is that humans really only receive about 30% out of 100%. We're only receiving about 30% of that data, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that means out of 100% of what's being said, our brain has an algorithm to put the pieces together. So that's you cooking, you on the phone, you're doing this, you're moving around, and someone is talking to you, and you're having a dialogue, right? Effectively, because you can fill in the blanks with your brain, right? But you're not really hearing 100% of what's being said. I'm saying that we're only receiving about 30% of the information. We can only, like, you only have so many words in your brain, period. Like, you only have so many words. So, although you think is very extensive, we don't have as much vocabulary as you think we do, you know. And this is why
Mm-hmm.
they influence you to read, because you begin to hold on to some of that data that you collect. So the reason I said about the 30% is understanding what communication is an exchange of a dialogue. And if you already, by science, you're only hearing 30% of that communication, then that means you've already lost 70%. So if you are half listening, that 30% now becomes 15%. So a lot of the information might be miscommunicated, misunderstood, misrepresented, because we're not effectively listening. And also with women, women tend to listen to respond, because there's a defense mechanism that prevents them from wanting to feel pain. So you better not say nothing that's going to hurt me. So in the process, before the dialogue is complete, typically women, if they feel it's heading in that direction, they begin to defend, which means the listening skill has now diminished, because we're listening to respond. We're listening to defend. This doesn't mean that men are better. Men are probably receiving 15% of the data, even if they're trying. So this is just my opinion. So
Okay.
go ahead. I know you want to let me have it. Go ahead.
No, 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 no. I'm not going to give into that, what you're trying to say. You notice I'm moving my hands, so I'm using the spoken and the unspoken here. But I would just like to add to that. I totally agree with what you're saying. I just don't want to be just classified for only women. I mean, there are some men
Yes.
also that are listening to just to respond. But I think that's just both men and women. I would just give that disclaimer.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
add. Yeah.
So to complete the answer to the question is how to have a better dialogue. I'm going to use the word dialogue because it's an exchange of information, right? You start out by
Right.
respecting. You know, you and I, we have done some coaching together in relationships. We've coached a couple, right? So
Hmm.
one of the things you remember we spoke about, I gave them an assignment to have a listening
Listening
party,
party.
right? To have a
Hmm.
listening party. What does that mean? That means that I am celebrating the opportunity to hear everything that you feel, regardless regardless of how it makes me feel. That's a listening party. My ability, despite me wanting to defend what you're saying, despite me believe that it's not true or true, despite on the way that you're expressing yourself, I am having a listening party. And I am going to, in an uninterrupted way, receive all of that data and then process it before I respond to it. That's what a listening party is. And this is what affects effective This is what calls effective communication: the ability to receive it regardless and then respond based on what you received, all of the information, process, and then you give that dialogue exchange right back to them based on all the data you received. And this is what helps create effective communication.
And I think that's well said. I want to add to that. So what's also going to help you have effective communication is understanding the different communication styles. I first would recommend that you would have to understand your own way of communicating and your own style, and then understand the other person, especially if you're in a relationship or a couple, understanding their style. Let me just go over some of the four different communication styles. And then I'm gonna give you an opportunity to share your input on that. So these communication styles are based upon your personality, your core. We talked about the four C's and looking inward as far as your core. So we have analytical, which is my favorite because I'm analytical. And that communication style is just clear, direct. They focus on the data. They want the information. That's what they want. And then you have the intuitive communicator. Someone who's intuitive is going to be more of a mediator. They're going to be there to mend, to want to build bridges. And then we have a functional, which is someone is conscientious and they need more time to plan out what they're wanting to communicate. They may be slow in their communication style. And then the fourth one is something that's someone who's more personable, someone who's very expressive of what you will call rich, emotional communicator. So those are just in a nutshell the four different type of communication styles. And like I said, I know that I'm analytical. So I would add to what you said about having the listening party is also knowing your different communication styles. And if you know that you are that person that's looking for that clear, direct, and you're talking to someone who's not so direct, someone who is more functional, and they have to go through the over the river and through the woods and down the valley and up again to communicate what they want to communicate. When you're having that listening party, then that is a time for you to be realizing, okay, I just want the highlights. I just want the direct answer. But I know I'm talking to someone who's long-winded. So I'm going to be patient and do the active listening and collect the data, process it, and then communicate. So what do you think about that?
That was good. That was a drop the mic moment right there. That's it. You sprinkle a little bit of respect and consideration into that. I think we can put
Yeah.
that in the can and we can sell it. We can actually do something with that. That's effective communication, right? Some people believe effective communication is agreeing with the other party,
Yeah.
right? So that's a misconception. You can have effective dialogue, but you don't necessarily have to always agree. And then understanding how you communicate, which was key. Some people express themselves different. One of the biggest things I would say for those people that are in relationships or have been in relationships, one of the things that I notice when I speak to couples, and I've experienced this as well personally, what happens is when someone initiates communication based on discontent, then the other person communicates their discontent, right?
Yeah.
But the platform was indicative to the person that had the complaint or the concern, right? So the person that had the concern mustered up enough to find the opportunity to present the concern. And that's when the other person says, well, I don't like this. And now you have now communicated out of your element. Now you're communicating out of defense. Now you're communicating out of anger. Now you
Mm-hmm.
are communicating out of retaliation. So understanding when to communicate and how to communicate. Some people are effective by finding the perfect time, like scheduling an opportunity to talk because maybe they have hostile personalities. Maybe they
Mhm.
are a little withdrawn or subdued or feel intimidated. So maybe they have to schedule and say, hey, when you get some time, or can we? Right. And then there are other people that are
Yeah.
the very aggressive and very A-type personality that would just go right in on it, like boom, So
Yeah.
understanding how you're wired, and then also being considerate to the person that's on the receiving end of that communication. So understanding is a key word here, and having the level of respect, understanding that you need to receive the dialogue, the information before you process it and respond.
You're right. These are the challenges. We're actually, talking about challenges to having good, effective communication. And I definitely want to get to the chat because we got a lot that's in the chat there. But before we get into the chat, I wanted to talk about those challenges. When, how can you have effective communication with someone who's not in the conversation with you? Now, I will admit, and I'll be transparent, sometimes I will shut down. When I feel like I'm not being heard, or I'm trying to get this message through and the message is not coming through. I don't know, ladies, if you felt the same way. Um, then I will shut down. I'll be like, I'm not being heard. I
Right.
feel like I'm talking to a wall.
Right.
Here's the shutdown. Here's the shutdown. So, what in a situation like that where you feel like it's not, because I think everybody's yelling at each other, but no one's really actively listening to each other. And I think you were talking about that. So, if you could just elaborate a little bit, and I think you addressed that, but what happens when you're in the shutdown phase with someone, so to speak?
Um. Well, first of all, you have to understand the dynamics of who you're dealing with, because some people automatically shut down when they feel like there's going to be adversity, right? Or
Yeah.
controversy. Some people automatically already shut down before you even began the conversation. So you have to understand who you're speaking with. And then you have to understand you and your tone of communicating. If someone is timid
Hmm.
and you are loud, then you're more likely to have someone shut down. Um, and I'm thinking the best way to communicate with someone that has shut down is to no longer communicate, because you have
Hmm.
to find the right environment. So if you're shut down with me, I'm going to stop. I'm going to pump the brakes. What I will not do is force communication, because now I'm putting you in a situation where you have to perform. And I'm not sure I'm
Hmm.
getting the organic person. So what I want to do is give you the control on you
Yes.
telling me, okay, how do I give you the space to be who you are and communicate the way that you want to communicate what it is that you're feeling? Because it's obvious right now, I'm just slinging words. That means absolutely nothing because you're not receiving. So that 30% of hearing has now went down to zero, and I'll never get this air back that I'm breathing out to you. So how about let's stick a fork in it right now. Let me stop. Let me say, okay, so when or how is it that you would like to have this conversation? Can I express what I'm feeling first, or would you like to go first? I promise I won't interrupt. I'm setting the stage. And if that doesn't work, then we're
Yeah.
going to have to allow you the opportunity, because it's you the one that shut down, the opportunity to tell me what's the best method or mechanism or platform for you to be able to communicate.
That's good. That's good. Because remember, we said that people remember how you make them feel. And if they feel like you said, they're being attacked, they could shut down, they could attack and express. But the whole point of it is that there's a message that needs to be sent out and a message that needs to be received. And it's all about expression. And I agree with you that it takes the act of communication that needs to be done. I want to look at the chat because we got a lot going on in the chat, and I want to I
A
want to
lot of
address that. So
great communication going on in the chat.
yes,
And I want to say that
so
while
we
you're
got
looking at it, right? That communication is not all verbal or nonverbal. It is also written or digital,
yes,
right? So there are different forms of communication.
absolutely. You're right. So in the chat, we've got Ronnie. She said, effective communication for me is also understanding the other person or people by listening, understanding, respecting each other's conversation, and coming to a common conclusion. Hashtag communicate and be able to communicate. We got Sheila G that says, Rich, you are absolutely correct. You talked about this before. Listening to respond, it made difference in how I started to intake information. I learned to gather the information, process it, then respond. So I see I was listening to you.
I
Then we
love
have
it.
Zoe.
Love
He
it.
says, I'm sorry, just communication is very huge in my life on all levels. I don't ever want to be without. It is always a great way. Thank you, Bridget, for the comment. Thank you, Zoa. And then I think we have a question that says, is it a problem being a direct communicator, being unfiltered? I don't like hurting people's feelings, but it's just putting it out there. So I want to stop right there and give you a chance to respond to that question. She said, is it a problem being a direct communicator, unfiltered? Hey, I'm analytical. I am a direct, clear, concise communicator. So what's your answer on that?
It's twofold because I'm going to say yes and no. You have to. We spoke about respect and consideration, right? So
Yes.
if it's going to be harmful, direct is never a bad thing. But it's kind of like giving someone something unwrapped, right? Raw, right? So it's not going to necessarily always be received because I prefer direct communication. I love it, right? Some people shut down with direct communication. So if you want to be effective, you have to consider who's your audience, who are you communicating to or with. If you're being direct with someone that needs that firm directness, that needs to hear that raw and uncut version of you, kudos. You have now won some effective communicating because they need to hear directness. Now, someone that's timid or someone that's a little bit more conservative or that may have some self-esteem issues or some
Mm,
other internal issues that's going on, you could be causing more harm than good just to express yourself. So I'm saying, yes, be direct, but also consider the delivery. Tone is everything.
yeah.
Tone is everything.
I knew you was going to say that, and I was just getting ready to get to tone. And I know that you've implied this to women. I don't know how to feel about that, ladies. I mean, put something in the chat if you feel me, because he's talking about our tone all the time. So I just want to say this. I think this is my comment. Now, all jokes aside, I think that we were created as women. We have the power of influence, ladies. And because we have the power of influence, it is our words that are so powerful and how we say our words that we can lift up or we can tear down. And so we have to choose which one we're going to use it for. So I think the way I've learned how to address as far as the tone is realizing that, look, my words are going to hit a target and I want to make sure that it's well received. But that takes me being intentional with my audience and caring to make sure to deliver this with the right tone. Because I've heard that before, ladies. My tone. Yeah, Rich, yeah, you said it.
All the time. All the
My
time.
tone.
All the time.
So
Well, the thing is,
but I will say this before you say anything. I want to get this point across to ladies. It no way diminishes who you are, your power you have as a woman, your influence, who God created you to be. It takes nothing away from you in you delivering that message with your tone. What do you think about that?
tone is everything, right? If you're going to communicate, tone is everything. You can do your version of whatever you think is required or what's necessary. Now, the effects and the results you have to be responsible for, right? Because if it didn't land the way you want to land, or that person shut down, or that person got violent, or that it had an adverse effect, did you really effectively communicate? So I give you an
Mhm.
example. All right, you're in traffic. Someone cuts you off. I see this a lot. Former law enforcement officer cut somebody off. They let the window down. They communicate. Not effective. Shots fired. Was that effective communication? No. you have to consider all the factors that are involved and what are the results, and are you going to be okay with the results? So
Yeah.
it's only effective if it works. It has to work both ways to be effective. Now, sometimes we're just blowing off steam. Hey, by all means, have at it. If you want to just give somebody a tongue lashing, that's not what I'm talking about. We're speaking about dialogue. It comes both ways,
Yes.
receiving and giving. But if you're communicating to get off some steam and you need to tell somebody off, by all means, be direct.
I think there are moments, especially in relationships, where someone may say, I just want to vent. And we're going back to that listening party. I think you have to give space and time for someone to communicate without the um, worry or concern or being paranoid of how it's expressed. Because I think it is healthy in a dialogue to have that space, a safe environment where you can just express yourself. And then of course there still needs to be respect in there as well to listen and to say, hey, let's both do some active listening in this listening party. Because remember you said we have to sprinkle some respect in there
Yep.
and sprinkle some patience in there so that we can have the good results that we want to have.
Yeah.
So
So let me
I
add a
want to
little
turn
bit. Let me
go
add
ahead.
let me add something to that. Also, position. How you are when you're speaking to someone. If someone is sitting and you're standing, that is not
Mm,
effective communication. Um,
yeah.
if you're towering over someone and they feel like there's a disadvantage, um, is it really effective communication if you put yourself at a higher level? If you're equal to someone and you're both sitting down and you're having a dialogue, that could be effective. If your arms are crossed or your legs are crossed,
Hmm.
this is something that I had to study. The body kinetics, right? How are you communicating? Because if your arms are folded, Richard Adams will not be talking to you because I know it's not effective. I know you're shut down. If your feet are crossed, pay attention. Most people are going to either cross their feet or cross their arms. And then another cue, this is what I look for. Are you leaning in or are you leaning back?
But
That's telling me exactly. I am literally profiling you before I give you my undivided attention. These are cues that we can pay attention to know whether or not our communication is effective.
that's very good. I like that. I want to give another chance to look at the chat and the comments that we have there. Um, I've got some comments to what I've said. Thank you for that. Um, in agreement with what I was saying. Thank you, ladies, in agreement with what I was saying about the women and the tone and everything like that. Thank you for having me back. So, and then we have Ronnie says, my shutdown is not get out of character if the other person is being rude. Leave it alone. Try it again if you can. Okay. And then there's another comment, disagreeing with what you were saying. So I think you have to be careful and you have to understand that, like you said, if I'm expressing myself as a result of what somebody else is saying, I mean, there's all different things that are going on. But we're all talking about effective communication because you want to make sure, because I believe that you care about the other person that's on the other side of what's receiving what you're saying. And because you care, you want to make sure that is hitting the target is well received. What do you think
Mm-hmm.
about that?
Great, great. I think it's amazing. Yeah, I think it's a great topic, great conversation. Um, it's really important to understand and kind of digest the idea of communication is a dialogue. It's the ability to relay information from one place to another. And by doing that effectively makes it um, more pragmatic, more efficient and effective, right? And then also understand, just as a human being, it is almost impossible for you to hear 100% of what's being said. The brain just doesn't receive that kind of data. So knowing scientifically that you're only receiving about 30% of the information that you're receiving, so you have to be intentional on receiving that 30%. So if you receive that 30% without interruption, then there's a stronger possibility that you can have a better dialogue, right? Not interrupting is going to be one of the most important things, allowing someone to speak. And then one of the other things that I want to leave you with is that sometimes we don't speak enough, and sometimes we have dialogue too long. You ever had a conversation with somebody that wasn't worth it and you just talked too long? You know, you ever had a conversation with someone where you talked too long and they didn't get a chance to speak? So sometimes we can speak too much or not enough.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to circle back as we're closing. Um, we talked about the four C's, building those connections and building those communities. And you need the good resource of having effective communication to build those communities and those connections. And just like I said, on the other side of your communication, you care enough about that person that you're talking to, so you can have that community and a connection. So these are things that we're doing to have that investment in community and actually having that connection.
Right.
So
Nice, nice. So I'm gonna leave you with this, like taking all these things together. We've been here for about 45 minutes, and I guarantee you that only 30% was actually digested of what we said. But that's not a bad thing. That's just how we're wired as human beings. But hopefully, it's the most important of the 30% that you're receiving. No, here's one of the things. I mean, this is a funny thing where with the intense training that I had the, I don't want to say privilege, but I've been interviewed and interrogated people that were considered to be terrorists, people that had murdered people, multiple people. Like I've done some really extensive interviews and investigations. One of the things that I learned, this it's funny now because I cannot unlearn it, is I know when people are lying. That's something that I probably wish I did not know. So you cannot turn it off. And they a psychologist has to brief you on what it is that you're about to learn to make sure that you're suitable to handle this information. Because when you go home, you're going to realize who's lying to you, which is probably going to be the ones you love, your kids, your family. Like you're going to be, so it's like coming home after being certified and learning this tactic. It's like, how do you affect communication when you already know? You know what I'm saying? That you're being deceived.
yeah.
But the point of the matter is, this is why it's important for you to be honest in your communication, honest in your dialogue and your expression. What is it that you really feel? What really happened? And be as truthful as possible and be as patient and respectful. And I guarantee you that dialogue and that exchange will get you a lot further if you sprinkle a lot of that stuff in there.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
with that being said, listen, this has been an amazing conversation. Matter of fact, every Tuesday is an amazing conversation. But hey, don't forget, you see on the site that we have a course that we're putting on, purpose, finding your purpose, and I want to help folks get to their purpose. I didn't determine or realize what my purpose was until later on in my life. So therefore, last month was predicated on just speaking about purpose. And I got a lot of dialogue, a lot of feedback. So I put together a 2-day boot camp, and Bridget and Linda are going to be assisting me with that. So please sign up for that 2-day boot camp. It is really impactful. There's an assessment, there's a test. It's not hard, but it tells you where you are in your purpose. It literally scores how far you are from being in your purpose. I put together, I'm proud of it. It's going to be a really good course. So make sure you sign up to take that Knowing Your Purpose boot camp. Please join. Trust me, it could be life-changing. So with that being said, any final words?
No final words at all.
All right. So this has been, and by the way, On the Ground with Danielle Brown. She's back tomorrow. Danielle Brown, On the Ground with Danielle Brown is back tomorrow. And also tomorrow, that cat Dave has a interview with a beautiful cancer survivor who's going to share a very warm, heartfelt story, but also inspiring. So this is Breast Cancer
Yes.
Awareness Month, and we're going to really be diving into honoring the survivors and those who may have passed on, and then also domestic violence
I love it.
awareness. So we're very
Yeah.
tapped in. So without further ado, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in, and know that Rich Live and the MSC Network loves you, and
We love you. And there's nothing you can do about it.
yeah, I love it. All right. Hey, it's been a Rich Live production on the MSC Network with my host with the most, Lady L. I will see you guys Saturday. Sign up for the course and stand by for another powerful conversation with
Yes.
Dr. Marcia. You know she brings the funk. So y'all stand by, all right? Love you guys. There's nothing you can do about it. See you.
Good night.